Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the show. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. We're going to take a quick couple, well, more than a couple seconds here to let people join the show. But for those of you that are logging in, thank you for joining another installment. Really excited to be back with you all. Lots of new innovations. I mean, we're this idea of producing at the speed of innovation in the age of AI is incredible. So we're going to dive into some of the latest innovations with the new release on the Automation Success platform. But give us a second. Unfortunately, I still haven't figured out. Speaking of innovation, I still haven't figured out how to incorporate some intro music, but I'm working on it. I've been playing around with music FX from Google. I've been playing around with, I think it's called Sonu, some AI generated music. It's not so much generating the music; it's about incorporating it into the LinkedIn platform. But we'll see how that goes. So give us a second, and we'll kick off the show as we wait for some more folks to join. Hope you're all having a great Friday. And for those of you early birds that joined, I hope amongst you there are some friends that'll be attending. Shameless plug here. Imagine Austin, which is happening in just over a month in Austin, Texas, the amazing town, city.
Gabe, let's talk about what you're doing to prepare for that right now.
Oh my gosh. Well, I am polishing my cowboy boots.
Okay.
I am working on my set list for karaoke on Tuesday night after the Imagine party. And I'm thinking about which color cowboy hat to get when I'm in town. What about you?
I am building decks like crazy right now. Um, Part of the challenge of doing Imagine again, every time we do these, right, is like we need to show up with something new and something that can help our customers to um, accelerate the growth and scale and impact of their automation programs. And so these are always a fun time to like kind of dig down and really understand what challenges people are having and how we can help address some of those with some new thought leadership, new concepts, new frameworks, new methodologies. So I can tell you that unequivocally, the content that we're bringing to Imagine this year is better than the last 2 or 3 years combined.
That's a big statement.
That's I'm a very bold statement, um, but I'm really excited about the sessions we have planned. I have 3 sessions with my frenemy, Mark Goodair, and I'm really excited about those because we always have a good time putting together content and then also delivering it in a fun, engaging way. So really excited for that. We've got some really brand new concepts that I think will change the game for a lot of our customers and their automation programs.
That's awesome. No, all kidding aside about the cowboy hats and stuff. You know, to your point, the experience at Imagine is always special. It's always exciting, and it's illuminating because you get to, you know, have these conversations one to one to a few customers, partners, prospects, as we would say in the marketing side. Talking to one another, sharing ideas, sharing their challenges, and being able to sort of like in some cases solve them right there. Have you thought about this? Oh, you could do that. And the light goes off, and then when that light goes off, it's just such a cool thing. And I love that we're able to do that in a very real way. This isn't just slideware, right? The stuff that you're doing isn't just slideware. Our customers are putting AI to work right now, responsibly, effectively, and starting to even scale. Whereas if you read the headlines, it's like a lot of people are sitting on the fence. Well, we're seeing a lot of benefits. And to that point, let's get the show started. This is about how to put Gen AI to work in AI in general with the power of automation. And we thought we'd dive in. We just had a release on the Automation Success platform, and with A360.32, and there's some great things coming. So in this edition, well, let me just back up. I think everyone recognizes your voice, Mr. Micah Smith, but how have you been? What have you been doing?
It's all been Imagine. It's been some different customer and partner engagement events. We were at Google Next recently. We showed up at an AWS event in London. We've been going around and helping people with that, getting started from 0 to 1 with generative AI, a topic that we'll be talking about in depth at Imagine for customers who are on the fence, like you mentioned. So we've been creating a lot of content around that area. I'm also all in on being able to define, quantify, and communicate on the benefits of an automation that's been delivered. And I think this is an area that a lot of automation programs ultimately struggle with. And this disconnect between sometimes using operational metrics to try to communicate a business value message. And so we are going to do a deep dive on that coming up at Imagine. And I've been working on that framework and some tools and tips and ways for people to maybe better communicate the way that they talk about program and opportunity impact.
I'm excited for that because I've had a sneak peek and we've talked about it a little bit. I think it's extremely helpful. And we've talked about this before on the show too, right? This idea of I was able to ship, 20 bots in the quarter. We're like, cool. Right. I'm oversimplifying.
Yeah, that doesn't translate very well to most leaders because there's not a standard definition of what a bot or what an automation can do for your organization.
Right. It doesn't tell you what the value is, right? But we'll go into that on another day. And to our audience, again, just a reminder, this is meant to be interactive. So raise your hand if you have questions, or as you have questions, get involved in the conversation, because today we have a very special guest. It is the one and only SVP of product here at Automation Anywhere, Mr. Steve Shaw. Steve, how are you, sir?
Hello. Doing awesome. So getting ready for Imagine, just like Micah, and but we also, like today we're talking about 32, but we've already got 33 like planned and just about ready to ship. We've got 34 that's in planning, and believe it or not, this is the time to start thinking about sort of like what's happening next year. So I know it feels like we're still at the start of 2024. I still periodically see somebody write 2023 on a date, but my head's already in 2025. And so this is, even with Imagine going on, getting to go and dream up about what's happening next is the big part of my day. And I swear the fact that somebody pays me to do this is like awesome.
That's so cool. But you just remind me of something. I think it's interesting as the SVP of product, and we've talked, I think, somewhat about this before. But you need to be a futurist, right? Your head needs to be out a year, anticipating what's going to be needed, so that we as a company are providing that solution to our customers. We've thought
Definitely.
ahead.
It's one of the privileges I have, like the way that Micah gets to go and talk to a lot of customers. I have that privilege of getting to talk to a lot of folks, and when you talk to a lot of people about what they're doing, what's next, what's important to them, you start hearing in between those lines implicit things that you should be doing as a product leader for figuring out what goes into the next generation of products. And so the conversations we're having today seed the thought process for what we need to build tomorrow. And in a lot of cases, those are big, complicated things, right? If we want to go and do like a whole new feature area, that's something that could easily take 3 or 4 releases to get done before the first version really ships. And so that means we're thinking about today what's going to be shipping probably summer of next year. And so that, we definitely have to stay on top of what's coming next. Where's the market going? What do what does everyone want to do? And in the end, what's going to drive real value? I can build an endless parade of features, but if they aren't providing value, there's no point.
That's it's such a great point. This idea of value, when Micah just mentioned, and started to tease a little bit about what he's going to be talking about at Imagine. But even when I interview customers and have these conversations, I mean, logically, right? It's not just about deploying the tech and sort of saying you've got the new widget or whatever, right? This is like, where's the business value so that you can communicate it? There's this productivity imperative. There's the growth imperative for the market. So many things and so many ways that we're helping to drive these things. It's not just about sort of automating a task. If I'm oversimplifying, it's much bigger than that, and the impact is real, and we're seeing it, which is awesome. But as we think about these innovations, as we think about the innovations in the product and the platform, let's go right into some of the latest innovations in the new release. So .32 just released, and I have a question for both of you. What's your favorite? What's your favorite update?
Oh, I always love hearing Micah's top list, so I'm going to let Micah go first.
You know, we did a top 5. I think that video is still pending. It'll be out next week. But, one of my favorite features continues to be the capabilities that are released with document automation. Having worked very specifically in document processing for 15 plus years at this point, that one is always one that has a special place in my heart because of the challenges that we've always had with being able to do extraction from semi-structured and especially unstructured documents. It used to be that you had to create a template for every single document type you wanted to extract data from, and you would use things like registration corners and things like that to make sure that your document was perfectly lined up so you could extract the data from that exact XY coordinate on an image. And to see how far we've come to being able to now just like dump in a multi-page document. I have no idea what the format is. It could be paragraph style, free form, and then be able to extract data from that. And now with .32 being able to include tables in that as well is just continuously mind-blowing to me. And it's always amazing to see. It's fun to play with. It's fun to work with. It gives you that taste of being able to tweak and customize your prompts in a certain way because you're essentially writing what data it is that you're looking for each field you're trying to extract. So I like that because you still get that creativity of being able to how I want to word this to get the right output. And it's a easy way to get started with generative AI in my mind. It's a great way to jump into generative AI without having to worry about like which LLM am I using, which provider, stuff like that. It's very simple. It's already built into the product, and it couldn't have been easier to set up and use. So follow that.
Sounds like you've got a strong opinion here. We'll unpack that. Steve, you being the guest, let me apologize on behalf of Micah for taking over. Just kidding. Steve,
you're asking me to pick a favorite child, and yeah, I'm. So let me first begin by disclosing not necessarily my favorite child, but one that I know that is definitely driving a lot of excitement is API tasks. We're continuing to innovate around that, and we've got a bunch of cool new capabilities that kind of really reduce that friction around getting started with it. I know that a lot of folks have still not really explored it, and I want to encourage everyone to do it. Give it a try. We include some amount of capacity with every build that goes out there. So if you haven't given it a try yet, definitely recommend it. And there's a bunch of cool stuff around it. Specifically in this release, that reduction of friction is stuff like, a run now button. So you're able to go and run an API task on your desktop and use that for the development process. But the the thing that still, really gets me excited about it is the fact that it all runs in the cloud, and it performs and behaves like, traditional software does, right? 20 plus years ago, I used to be a productive member of society and wrote software. And we would think in terms of milliseconds and microseconds. And, when you start getting into RPA, right? RPA is kind of limited by the speed at which Windows can log into a desktop. And so if you have a big profile, that always takes forever to get started. With API Task, you can get back to those millisecond timings. And that sounds silly. Like, why would you be excited about milliseconds? I'm excited about milliseconds because it means that you can now weave tasks into these whole user experiences and make it an interactive part of how a user sees an automation. So API Task has definitely got me excited. But again, I'm going to stand up for all my other features. Every feature is my favorite. So
I want to dive into that a little bit more. So two things. One, with API Task. So as the business user, as the layperson here in this conversation, what you're suggesting is that, for instance, I've got some automations built and I'm using Automation Copilot integrated into Teams, right? So I can sort of click a button and call an automation to do a thing, to do an action.
Mhm.
In my case, we've got a very complex sort of model built with multiple AI agents and automation in order to generate content and then publish it. And there's a whole workflow for approvals and all kinds of things. Previously, it would likely, it could take an inordinate amount of time, but me as a consumer and as a sort of business user, but think about a consumer like behavior, of course, I'm expecting to press a button and get an answer very quickly, right?
Totally. I'm sorry. Go ahead and finish your thought.
I know. I was going to say, is this kind of what we're talking about? Again, in layman's terms, is this like for a dummy like me? I'm like pushing a button, and then I'm like, wait, what happened? Like, I don't know. But now I'm getting the thing that I asked for quickly.
Yeah, we always want our computers to work with us at the speed we're working. So, you're in the middle of an email, you're sitting there and you're thinking about it, and as you're typing, you don't want lag between the letters you type and what you see on the screen. And so, those of us of a certain age who remember, like, when GUIs came out for the first time, you would see that lag between typing and words appearing on the screen because, the software was a lot slower. You didn't get kind of good GUI adoption until computers got fast enough that it was just as responsive as using kind of, old school stuff, like just straight text mode. This is the same thing, with automations. If I've got something on Teams and I'm chatting with an agent back and forth, I want to be able to get that instantaneous response. So if I need to make a decision, for instance, I've got an automation that is helping me manage my inventory, and I need to be able to make a decision about, hey, something just came out of inventory or damage happened. I need to remove it from the list of available inventory. I should be able to go in and see that list of inventory without having to wait 10 seconds, right? I want that list to pop up instantly. And if it's not coming up instantly, its usability kind of wanes. You start seeing initial excitement about something, and then it kind of falls apart over time. So when things take a long time, that was cool when it was all sort of in the back. It would run in batch, and it could take it all the time in the world at once because we're thinking about jobs that took hours to run. Now, if I want something that is on my desktop, super responsive, and letting me get sort of the improve my day-to-day life, I need that fast response. I don't want to wait. So, I'm using milliseconds versus seconds, and I'm kind of geeking out over time and fractions of a second of time. But humans start perceiving when things are slow about a quarter second in. Like a quarter second, we feel it. And so being able to beat that quarter second time is critical. And that was part of the design requirements that went into API Task.
And again, I think like from my perspective, sort of whether it's front office or anything else, like if you start to think about the customer experience in contact center, or if your customer is the business user and you're trying to scale into a function because you know that you're going to have, effect, if it's not a good experience for them to use the thing and run it, they're just going to go back to going to the old ways, right?
No, totally. I mean, think about the last time you were on hold with having called a contact center somewhere, right? Every time they say go on hold, they're waiting for their computer to do something.
Right.
Yeah, so that's what we want to avoid.
Can we break down a bit what is an API task? Because I know we kind of jumped into the performance of them, which I think is the huge differentiator here. But what does it mean for me to, as an automation leader, create an API task as a part of a Copilot process or as a part of a form versus using a task bot like I've used previously?
No, totally. And that's a great question, Micah. And this is probably one that I still hear a lot of. So I think everyone is familiar with traditional task automation. This is the stuff that we've been doing for years. We would build our automation, and we could do all kinds of crazy stuff like mimic the way that keyboard presses happen and mouse clicks happen, and we could interact with any application, whether it was old or it was new. And that was really powerful. But in order to do that, and in order to especially interact with graphical applications, what we needed to do was log into Windows. And so the automation would go and log into Windows, and it would run there. The thing with logging into Windows is that anyone who's dealt with Windows in an enterprise environment knows that logging in can take a while, because you got to synchronize profiles and download and connect to map drives and all that other crazy stuff that happens in the background. API task is a subset of what that does, that's focused just on being able to interact with APIs. And when you focus on APIs, what you quickly find is that now that dependency of needing to kind of dig into Windows goes away, and you're able to go and get an automation. And this is 90% of what you could do historically, just minus the capability of going and interacting with like old, 20-year-old Windows applications. As those go away, API task becomes sort of the new normal, the de facto standard. In that, you're able to go and call a bunch of APIs. You still get all of the controls you're used to in terms of being able to interact with variables and be able to make calculations. And we don't have to run them on a Windows desktop. We can run them in the cloud. So that's kind of one big thing about it. The second big thing is where before we were constantly waiting for Windows to catch up to us. Now we don't have to wait for Windows to catch up to us, because we can go and run these at sort of full system speed. And when you can do that, you're now getting much faster response times. So all the benefits of an automation, the simplicity of a task automation, but with the speed of not having to log into Windows, and with the flexibility of being able to run it in the cloud. That is what API task is.
I love it. To our audience, I'm curious, raise your hand if you're using or planning to use the new feature, and how. I would love to hear from you guys.
One other thing I would add to that is the benefit for automation leaders, right? Because if you look at a normal use case or opportunity that I'm about to take on, I need to worry about the bot agent capacity that I have. If it's a scheduled automation, slotting that in to when it's going to run and where, or provisioning a new VM. But if it's an API task, I really don't have that same concern. I don't have to worry about the machine provisioning locally and things like that. It just executes for me, and it executes in cloud.
It sounds like Micah converted to the Terminator. I'm not sure what happened there, Micah. But Steve, did you hear the question?
Yeah, I did. So just to make sure Micah was clear, Micah raised a really good point about the business side of this conversation. And for a lot of business owners, the cost of running automation is a real concern. So being able to go and run this stuff in the cloud means all that cost of infrastructure goes away, right? We're taking on that cost as part of our cloud operations, and we've optimized it to death. So we can do that and deliver it at a reasonable cost. This also means that if you are getting started and you want to try out, let's say, a new project, where before you could not start a new project without provisioning a bunch of infrastructure, and that took time. So your time to seeing some value out of the project was always, it could have been weeks, if not months, depending on how fast you can procure stuff. Now you're able to go and just turn on a switch. We'll run it entirely in our cloud, and you could literally see the first results of your project the moment you have your first set of tasks automated. So the time to value becomes significantly faster with something like an API task as compared to spinning up more bot runners, in the old traditional way.
Good stuff. Well, there you go, guys. API tasks in .32. Jump in, get some. So guys, I also voted. I think generative recorder is super interesting because one of the things I've heard, and again, I'm the business user guy, so I can't speak at depth, but in talking to customers, talking to others, this idea of you have an automation built and the UI changes, there's changes to an app, there's upgrades, updates, whatever they might be, and potentially can break the automation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Talk to me a little bit about generative recorder, and now we're getting into the AI side of things. What is new and special about generative recorder?
A whole generative recorder. That is. See, this is when I told you you're making me pick between all my favorite children. Like, this is exactly what I meant. So, okay, because this is where my smarter half always teases me that I get into professorial mode. So I'm going to try not to do that too much. Cut me off if I'm doing that. But everyone knows what recorder does in terms of it's going to mimic your keyboard, keyboard clicks, mouse clicks, etc., all that stuff. The thing that always made recorder a little bit brittle is that if you were mimicking what you were seeing on the screen and interacting with it, the moment what was on the screen changed, it couldn't always react to those changes. And what we're finding is that with SaaS applications, the frequency of those changes is getting faster and faster, right? Salesforce belts out a new release every 3 months. You're getting new releases coming out of Workday, SAP, for HANA, et cetera. Like, all of the major application vendors are changing their apps multiple times a year. And so that causes those recordings to break. So what we looked at was, could we use generative AI to figure out when those breaks were happening and then automatically work around them by figuring out what is sort of the equivalent function that was on the screen. So we started running a couple of experiments, we got it working, and we've turned this into a feature, which is generative recorder. And what generative recorder will do is exactly that. It's going to look at the screen, it's going to say, hey, wait a second, this app changed, and I'm expecting this button over here or this text box over here. It's moved. What's the equivalent thing I need to do in order to keep going? Figures it out, and it's able to basically automatically continue the application. Now, it'll let you know, it'll put that in the audit logs and stuff like that, so that it's not doing it secretly behind the scenes or something. But this means that if your automations are running at 2 a.m, you're not coming into the office the next day only to find out that like a bunch of stuff broke. What you're going to get instead is notification that generative AI figured out how to work around it. It kept the automations going, and they were able to run to success. And you're able to now go back and kind of calmly say, update my application, and make the necessary changes so that I don't have to depend on generative AI to kick in every time. So we're seeing from our trial runs upwards of 50 plus percent of the automations that were breaking don't break anymore. And we're really excited by sort of the refinements that we're starting to put into generative AI so that we're able to get the recorder piece to, cope with even wilder changes and still correctly execute.
Yeah, I love this feature. And I think it's really cool that it's doing this in a couple different ways, right? There's the native fallback, and then there's also the generative AI fallback. So we're taking several stabs at this before we say this isn't going to work or we can't find this object. And I think from concept, it's really interesting. But then when you put numbers behind it, Steve, with the 50% improvement, I think that's huge. And this addresses the exact issue that a lot of people have with UI-based automation.
Micah, that's a really important point, because if you look at where costs go for how much does it take to maintain an automation, right? That ability to maintain an automation and keep it up to date and keep up to date with all of those changes, it could easily go and eat into the benefit like way more than we want it to. And so being able to just bring generative AI into the picture and take, half of that back is huge. And they're already trying to figure out, what's that step that we're going to take in order to make it 70% or 80%. The other thing, and Micah, I don't know if you caught this, but because I saw you were working on some demos earlier, when your generative AI will tell you what the correction is to your automation. So you're able to pick up that change, and in one click, you're able to accept that change, and automatically your bot is updated.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And this is helping me as a developer keep up to date with some of the changes of dependent applications. And yeah, you're right. We have been working on some stuff with this. This will show up in bot games that we're going to be doing at Imagine with more ABP, always be plugging. So we'll have a Automation Anywhere challenge for bot games where we'll be featuring some of the capabilities of Generative Recorder. So it's super fun and easy way to get hands-on with trying some of this stuff out. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a really interesting feature. I've seen it in practice. We have put it through some of the most rigorous testing that I can think of, with purposefully changing the UI every single time the page loads to make it even more challenging for Generative Recorder. And it's still able to navigate through those interface changes and find the correct objects and make those recommendations. So yeah, I think this has been a really fun one to see the product team build and develop and test and improve. And it's awesome that it's available for everyone to try out now too.
Micah, I'm glad you brought up bot games and Imagine.
Yeah.
Hashtag shameless plug. If you had any doubt as to why you should come to Imagine, I mean, just the bot games that'll be Imagine only available at Imagine in person. I'm thinking this is why you got to come to Austin.
That's right. We're going to have 3 bot games challenges of varying degrees of difficulty. And you'll be able to get hands-on with API tasks as a part of 2 of them, actually. And as well as document automation and Generative Recorder. So these new bot games challenges will encourage people to use the newest and best capabilities available from Automation Anywhere. And frankly, they would be almost impossible challenges to solve without these new capabilities. So it's a fun way for people to get hands-on, try this stuff out, see how it works in practice, try it in a fun, scored, timed environment to see how all of that works. We'll also have Bot Games Lightning there, which is our touchscreen version of Bot Games that is proving to be quite popular and fun. We introduced that at Google Next earlier this year. We also did it at an AWS event last week. and there was actually people waiting in line to play. It's just fun. It's easy to do. We've got a leaderboard tied to it. So yeah, a lot of fun things that we have planned for Imagine, and great opportunities for people to get hands-on with the newest and best.
I feel like we got to get Bot Games Lightning into the hands of our customers and our automation leaders, so they can give it to their stakeholders to get a little taste and flavor of what exactly the awesomeness is, and see it and feel it.
Yeah.
So just jump on that for me, would you?
We'll add it to Micah's to-do list.
Yeah.
I heard it's really short. He's got
I was
nothing to
looking
do
for
this
some
month
stuff to do,
before
so-
Imagine.
What is Imagine again? Sorry, you guys keep mentioning this Imagine thing. I'm not sure what we're talking about. This is good stuff. I think just on the generative recorder side, I think what's interesting too is just like from my perspective of, as I look at like the generative AI applications from my perspective, and sort of say my peer group, and again on the business user side, even in the marketing side specifically, it's a lot about content generation, and that's what most people seem to be using the LLMs for. And it could be to create a social post, or it could be to write a blog, or a paper if you're a kid doing your homework, or whatever it might be. I just love this idea of being so smart about applying the power of generative AI to something more, what's the word I'm looking for? Substantial or significant. I don't know. I just think it's so cool.
It's wow. One of my pet peeves is that when I speak with somebody and they, to the extent that they're thinking about generative AI is content creation. Like,
Yeah.
I'm going to use ChatGPT to write something, and the real strength of generative AI in my mind is its ability to read stuff.
Mhm.
This is something that read and understand it and be able to turn it into something that code knows how to use. This is something that is, we always saw those as impossible tasks, right? You could always create templates and use them for stamping out material that got sent to large numbers of people, right? And Gen AI can help accelerate that and add some color to it and whatnot. But being able to go and ingest data and turn it into something that is machine workable opens up whole new avenues of possibilities that I don't think we really had before. Generative recorder is one example of being able to do that, not just for English, but for reading somebody else's code, in this case, web pages. I think, Micah, you had mentioned your excitement around what's happening with document automation. There's new capabilities around Gen AI and Doc Auto, which is not just about the tables, but it's about you can query the document. Have you gotten a chance to play with that one yet?
Yeah, absolutely, and I've loved it. I think the power there is twofold. One, a lot of people still have large dependencies on paper-based or PDF-based transactions, right? From contracts to things like lease agreements and mortgages, and we still do a lot by forms, whether it's because of the requirements of wet signatures or other legal agreements that have to be in some kind of format. We ultimately still have a lot of forms that are used for transactions that our customers and any organization is using on a daily basis. And so the ability to continue working with those, but to be able to understand them in better and new ways is, like I said, amazing to me. And even with documents that have not been pre-trained, we don't have to have like a large sample set and dump that in there and then start, going through them. We can get really accurate and high extraction rates with just, hey, this is the first time you've ever seen the document. Here it is. This is the kind of data I want out of it. here's some basic information about how it's formatted, whether it's a number or string or things like that. But yeah, it's amazing how accurately and how well it's able to read data out of that. And I've been on the side of trying to purposely screw it up, and I can't, right? So we, like I said, we have a lab coming up for Google or for Imagine, where we're going to be digging into using document automation, and we're doing some stuff with lease agreements. And I purposely created the lease agreements in a way to make them tricky to read, and generative AI is still able to extract all of that through document automation and get the data out correctly.
Yeah, and that it, uh, I've been following this space for a long time. I remember when the original GPT-3 came out a couple years back. Um, the all of the technology just floored me. That this is like a whole new level above that. So, um, really excited by what we're going to be able to do with this. And I think Gabe, you hit on a really important point. This is not just gimmicky, right? Um, we've been we've made it a point not to go and just do gimmicky use of Gen AI, right? I'm going to slap a chat interface on this, or I'm going to
Hmm.
slap something that is another, chat thing for being able to query my data. I want to be able to do useful stuff. And so if you look at all of the new things that we've introduced to make the developer life better, generative recorder, suggest next action, etc. These were all built on customizations to models that allowed us to get really specific for use cases and really help accelerate that whole dev process and remove the costs associated with building automations, as well as making it easier for somebody who's maybe not a sophisticated developer to be able to get their automations built, but with the same level of reliability that it used to take a full-blown programmer to do. So, this opens up a lot of new use cases, a lot of new doors for possibilities, an expansion of the number of people who can put this all together and be able to see success with it. So, I think we're still at the very beginning of this conversation. We're going to hear a lot more about it, but it is something where I don't want people to get Gen AI fatigue and then go, oh, Automation Anywhere is just doing the same thing that everyone else is. No, I am equally cranky with you. We're not doing the same old thing again.
You're testing it against the cranky meter, which is fantastic. I think, you know, um, we sort of talked about it at the top, and we'll dive into it more at Imagine for sure, and in following conversations. But this idea of true enterprise value and creating that enterprise value, whether it's the resiliency and expediting the development that you just mentioned, um, enhancing the capabilities. This idea of um, these more sort of valuable AI powered automations, but then the effect of that is this great customer experience, and whether that customer is an internal stakeholder or a customer of the business. I think that's the part that gets really exciting for me too. To your point about the service call, and they're like, let me put you on hold again. Let me put you on hold again. Let me put you on hold again. I always go back to that, and I'm like, man, if you just had our platform like this, I wouldn't be having to do this right now.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Can I toss in another favorite because I like favorites.
Do it.
So connector builder. Um, this has been something that we've had an SDK for building connectors ever since A360 first shipped back in October 2019. For those of you who remember, it was back then called A2019. And so the thing about the SDK is that it was always a little bit of a tall bar for being able to ask somebody to build a customized connector for something. So if you wanted to build a new widget that you could weave into your automations, whether that was for bringing in some kind of customized AI or making special API calls for you or interacting with a internal application that is not commonly available. That was always something where you had to go and pull out like a Java programmer to do it. With Connector Builder, we've removed all of that friction. So now you're able to just go and point it at an API and say, go build me a connector against that. And it will turn around and spit out a connector for you. You can use it in either API task or you can use it in the standard RPA stuff. And suddenly you've got all of these new customized connectors that you're able to use with your automations that you couldn't do before. And you're not waiting for, I'm going to put in an enhancement request, or I've got to go and ask for budget to get a developer to build against the SDK. You're able to just go from zero to complete literally within, the time it takes for you to fire up the builder, point it at an API, and just click go. So definitely been a favorite. And another one of those, this is a real time saver. This makes the developer experience a lot better and removes that friction for getting things started. And of course, from the business end, removing the total cost of running an automation program. The more of that cost we can remove, the more of the upside we can demonstrate. And that just makes the whole ROI conversation that much stronger.
Super cool.
I think the really interesting thing about this is practically using it. You're looking at, let's say, a Postman collection you've been playing around with, or a Swagger endpoint that you're looking at, and it's got a bunch of API endpoints defined. You can export that from Postman or a YAML file coming from your Swagger endpoint, and you import that in, and it's doing all of the hard stuff for you. And if you say, well, that's cool, but where do I find all these collections? Like Postman itself has over 500,000 collections of API endpoints. So if there's any app that you're working with and you say, I wish I could connect to that, go to Postman. You can find almost all of these, export them, bring them into Connector Builder, and now you've got a custom package essentially that will enable you to interface with that application. So if it's WhatsApp, Box, whatever it is, like there's a connector for that, and you can import that and start to build that connection.
Yeah, and that,
what a great hack.
There you go, time saver.
Yeah, I'm not sure about you calling my software a hack, man.
Sorry, maybe it was a poor word choice. I'm just trying to keep up with the kids these days. You know what I'm saying? Gotta keep it real on the mean streets. I want to query the audience, see who amongst you is brave enough to tell us. We've mentioned now four of our favorites. Raise your hand. I'm curious what your favorite is or favorites are. And of course, Steve, I'm looking at you. So
I've already stated my favorites, and I'm not going to go further down this and get myself in more trouble with the rest of my engineers who are going to be like, dude, like I thought I was your favorite feature.
I thought we were homies. Yeah.
Yeah. But I'll bring up something that has been kind of a frequently asked question because it's come up as we've talked about API task a lot, and that is drawing comparisons between API task and the various API services and gateways that are out there. So think about something like a GCP's Apigee or something like that. And it's been a point of like, are these two the same thing? And I really want to emphasize that they're not, right? So like, for instance, in API task, when we think about sort of the metrics that we look at, the metrics that we look at are actually total executions, because a single sort of count of an API task is a run of a full end-to-end automation. And that full end-to-end automation may have had, 100 plus API calls within it. So when you're thinking about what we mean with an API task versus, say, what one of these other API services mean, they mean literally like one API call. not a whole execution. And so, bit of an apples and oranges thing, but it's come up enough that I wanted to use this opportunity to provide a little bit of clarity on that.
What's the implication there? Either fiscally or time wise or overhead. However you want to define overhead. What's the implication?
Yeah, I think the biggest implication is really going to be around cost, right? When you're looking at the cost of an API call in some of these cloud services, they are, forget fractions of a second, they're fractions of a fraction of a cent. And so the cost of them are very low. But when you start stacking up how many of them you need to use in order to make the equivalent of a full automation to run, plus the cost of hosting an automation, you start realizing that it's what's being described on those circumstances are just not the same thing. When you're counting the cost of a invocation of A360's API task, what you're getting is all of those hosting costs are covered, all of the invocations of the APIs are covered, all of the analytics are covered. And so, I want to make sure that we aren't comparing to two different things and trying to draw a comparison on price there, because they're just counting two vastly different use cases. So for instance, we've got right now one customer we're working with, really interesting use case. They actually are using API task to call APIs against Apigee. And so, this is a circumstance where you actually use both of them, but they're both playing very different functions, right? Apigee is serving as a proxy and giving security tools. API task is what's providing the automation. So, if you find yourself comparing the two and looking at them and going, why does this not add up? That's why it doesn't add up. They're not the same thing. And if you're not sure, come ask us. We'll be happy to break that open and provide clarity for your circumstance.
I love that. And thanks for breaking that down. I also love, Steve, that truly you do have an open door, even for, the great unwashed masses like myself, to come ask dumb questions.
It's we all ask questions. And Gabe, don't think that you're escaping my dumb questions about like how all this stuff works, because you gave me a link and I showed up here and like magic happened. And so I've got 20 questions for you after this about how this whole LinkedIn audio thing is working. Cool. Do we have any questions that we want to tackle?
Come on, who's going to raise their hand? It's a beautiful Friday. Well, at least here it is in California. Who's excited about these new releases?
Yeah,
Mike, you got a question?
I would say one thing, Steve, we may want to unpack is how do some of these capabilities that we've talked about come together, right? I'm building a connector. What does that mean for using that with API tasks? And what does all of that mean for what I can do with document automation and my process composer?
So you asked me this like with 5 minutes left, and I think that's a whole episode. So let's start with connector and API task. With connector and API task, I would use, if API task has its list of connectors and widgets for being able to build an automation. If I'm looking for a connector to some new SaaS application that's out there, but the A360 engineering team hasn't gotten around to building a connector for it yet, not a problem. You use Connector Builder to just quickly go and you'll get a connector out of it and you can load it up into API task, and now you can use it as part of your automations. So that removes a lot of that friction for being able to apply API task to new applications. And this is especially valuable for, companies that are big enough companies that have their own software development teams. They may have custom applications that simply do not exist outside of that organization. that would be another circumstance where you want to be able to go and feed an API set to Connector Builder and get a connector for that internal app out of it for you. So that was the Connector Builder and API task. Let's bring that back over to like Copilot for Business. Copilot for Business is that wonderful way of being able to access automations from the place where I run my applications. So, I spend a lot of my time in a day kind of bouncing between PowerPoint, Outlook, and Salesforce. And I want to be able to go and, see a bunch of sort of activity that are going on with my dev cycle. And now I can do that inside of Salesforce because I've built an automation. So Copilot for Business is calling a process. That process is invoking a series of API tasks. And now I'm able to go and pull data from our build system to be able to tell me, are today's builds coming out okay? Any surprises I need to be aware of? What do I have to go and harass my engineering team about? I can bring document automation into this story now by saying, you know what, I need to be able to go and take paper documents that are coming in that represent, reports that are coming in from the field. These are handwritten notes from sales engineers, et cetera. I don't always get everything digitally. I would like to, but I don't always. Being able to go and ingest that into the system and have it automatically trigger a set of automations so I can see it in a structured format within Copilot for Business becomes super powerful. And this is especially helpful when you're using generative AI with document automation, because now if there's a lack of structure to the document that I'm being sent, I'm getting sent raw notes. That's okay. Document automation will still be able to tease that apart and put it into something that I can use. And so that brings the whole story together. And therein lies kind of a kernel of differentiation between what we do and how we do it versus how some of the other players in the market space do it. We've brought all of these together on a common platform. So my ability to go and have, document automation drive a process, the process being able to talk to API tasks, and RPA is still part of the whole equation. All of this stuff can come together, and I'm not having to balance between different tools, different applications, import, export for getting a simple integration to work. Like all of that stuff is built in. And I think that's where a developer's life and a business user's life becomes a lot easier, because they're now in one place with one interface and not having to go and learn half a dozen things.
That was a marathon answer. He got it all in one use case.
That was fantastic. I mean, that's why the man is here. That's why he is the man. Thank you, Steve, for joining us. Another fantastic session. Thank you to our audience for joining as well. Stay tuned for more on these things. I hope that you'll all go out and check out the latest releases, the ones that we highlighted, as well as a bunch more. And on the next show, maybe we'll check in here on the feed for the event. Add your comments and let us know what you think. To Steve's note, and I've mentioned this before, each of us we're always available. DM us here on LinkedIn or comment here in the feed with a tag with your question or how we can help. We're here for you, and I hope you all will be in Austin with us, where we can go one-on-one and dive into these things and geek out a little bit. So, Steve, thank you again for the time. I know you're a busy man, and Micah, I know you're busy as well, as we're on the countdown to Imagine. Thank you both for another enlightening experience.
Oh, you're welcome. This was fun, so would love to do it again sometime.
Awesome. I'm going to hold you to it. Micah? We'll
Always
talk soon.
great. Yep. Great, guys. Thanks so much.
All right.
All right, y'all. Have a great weekend, everybody. Thank you.